Hello there, and welcome to another of Andre's artist profiles here on YouTube. Now, before I get into this particular artist profile, I would like to personally send a shout out and a very, very deep thanks to Scotty at Scotty's Record Shop. And I encourage all of you who are viewing my channel and all of my YouTube and Facebook and Google Plus friends who are watching these videos to seek out the artist profiles that Scotty does on his channel. It's Scotty's Record Shop, spelled out as all one word, all in lowercase letters. Look for his channel and subscribe on YouTube. He is very much a vinyl connoisseur, and he goes into detail about pressings and so on and so forth, and he gives a real strong insight into a little bit of the history of the artist, and the condition of vinyl and the pressings and so on and so forth. So if you're really interested in music and vinyl, or both, check his channel out. Anyway, on to this artist profile of the day. Today I'm going to be profiling one of my personal favorite artists, Mr. Robert Palmer. He sadly passed away in September of 2003 in France, Paris to be specific, of a heart attack. And I felt bad about that because Robert Palmer was an artist I would like to be a completist of his. I just love everything he touches, even if the era is not correct in terms of credibility in which he's recording in. I really enjoy his music. But I do have his first album here from 1974 called Sneakin' Sally Through the Alley. There are Alan Toussaint songs on here, and the meters play on it. It is just steeped in New Orleans funk big time. This is a spectacular album if you enjoy Robert Palmer doing hardcore funk. It doesn't have anything to do with what he did in the 80s. Also, some Little Feat songs are recorded on it, and some members of that band play on this album as much. This final track, Through It All, There's You. If you want to hear some, what I would call blue-eyed funk, maybe not blue-eyed in Robert Palmer's case necessarily, you want to check this album out. More than worth it. I also have his second record called Pressure Drop. I love that cover, you know, very typical kind of partial cheesecake artwork of the time. This is a very funky album as well, but also has more string orchestration that would be typical of Philly soul music. This came out in 1975. He made an album after this called Some People Can Do What They Like from 1976, which I don't yet have. There's a new version of it that's a bit rare. But anyway, the next album I have by him is another very thoroughly funky one called Double Fun. My favorite track on this is actually a hit that makes a great use of steel drums called Every Kind of People. I just love the message of that song. And this, again, is a very funky album. It kind of bridges the more soulful touches of his second with what he did on Sneakin' Sally Through the Alley. And this album came out in 1978. Originally, this is a CD version of it. I do CDs here because I think the vinyl community on YouTube has so many people involved in it, and even though people often talk about 8-tracks as well, I think CDs have got a bum rap over the years as a medium, so I try to give it more of a good reputation, to answer another question that Scotty's Record Shop, Scotty from that site, had for me. Again, another missing album here, Secrets, which had a big hit called Bad Case of Loving You, Doctor, Doctor. Anyway, the next album I have from Robert Palmer is Clues, which came out in 1980. This began his slow change into more of a new wave style of music. It's a much more robotic production on this album, and I really congratulate him on the conviction of being able to change his sound and still maintain his soulfulness. I mean, that's a hard thing to do, and a lot of people may take that for granted. Actually, speaking of Rod Stewart, whom Scotty actually did as a tribute to me on his last video, Rod Stewart tribute of his own, Johnny and Mary actually has been said to be the template for Rod Stewart's Young Turks, which was released about a year later. Anyhow, that's Clues. Great electro-funk album inspired to a certain degree by new and Kraftwerk and some of the electronic German experimentation in Europe. I was going on at that time. The next album that he did, and this is a really rare one now, is called Pride. This came out in 1983. And he did a cover on this album of You Are In My System. If you are not particularly moved by 80s music, or in a lot of cases, if you've let the press move you away from it, for some whatever reason, I suggest avoiding this album. It is very much defined by the boogie, funk, electro attitude of that era. But if you can look beyond that, there are some terrific songs if you are an 80s phobe. And one of them is You Are In My System. I personally love the 80s sound, but I think the press has really maligned the 80s and have decided for themselves, and for a lot of us, how we should feel about the music of that decade. End of soapboxing speech. I say that a lot. I'm a real big defender of the 80s. Great album. The next album is, of course, Riptide. This actually got Robert Palmer 2 major hits in Addicted to Love and, of course, I Didn't Mean to Turn You On. Nile Rodgers of Chic was involved in some of the production of this album. Except for I Didn't Mean to Turn You On, which is a furious dance funk number, most of it is rather experimental and electronic, kind of melds its early sound in with a lot of the newer things that were being done. This is an early digipack. I see a lot of these kind of copies of the CD going around. Good album. Not one of his most consistent overall, but in 1988, he released this album, Heavy Nova, which contained another kind of big, rock-oriented hit in Simply Irresistible, which is a signature song, as it were, of Robert Palmer, you could say. And this album was also contained a version of Jermaine Jackson's Tell Me I'm Not Dreaming. Otherwise, it's a pretty soulful affair. Somewhat more direct than Riptide. Again, if you don't like that 80s sound, you might not really care for this album too much. The next album that I have by him is Don't Explain from 1990. And this has a song on it called You're Amazing. It's very similar to Heavy Nova. A good album. A little too many tracks. There was a temptation during this time to fill every bit of the CD with songs. But a lot of good stuff on it. I mean, if you're willing to give it a listen. So that's my Robert Palmer collection. I wanted to thank Scotty's Record Shop for the shout-out. And I'm giving him a shout-out here, too. And Robert Palmer, whatever type of music you recorded, whether people like the era or not, you will be missed. I'll see you next time.